No one expected the NFL news cycle to explode that Thursday morning. Not after what Cleveland had been through already. Yet at 9:30 a.m. sharp, the unthinkable happened. Shedeur Sanders, the Browns' rising star quarterback and supposed face of their future, calmly walked into the team facility, requested an emergency meeting with the front office, and walked out as a man no longer tied to the Cleveland Browns. No trade, no dispute over money, no injury. Just a quiet, deliberate resignation, effective immediately. For a league built on drama, egos, and endless speculation, this moment still felt different. It wasn't fueled by the usual noise of social media or tabloid rumors. This was something colder, calculated. Sanders didn't storm out. He didn't make a scene. He arrived early, carried a small leather portfolio, and spoke with the kind of composure that only comes when a decision has been rehearsed 1,000 times. Within minutes, the team's leadership, owner Jimmy Haslam and general manager Andrew Barry, were in the room. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was not invited. And that detail, small as it seems, would set the tone for everything that followed. According to insiders, Sanders' words were precise, rehearsed, and unemotional. "I'm resigning from the Cleveland Browns organization, effective immediately," he said. "I appreciate the opportunity, but I can no longer operate within this environment." No raised voice, no tears, just finality. Haslam reportedly tried to reason with him, pointing to his starting position, his future, his potential legacy. But Sanders didn't budge. Barry offered changes, even hinted at reshuffling the coaching staff. Again, Sanders declined. "Some situations can't be fixed," he reportedly said. "This is one of them." When he left that room, the organization's fragile stability left with him. Within hours, the Browns' facility fell into chaos. Teammates were stunned. Coaches scrambled for explanations. And by the time the news broke, fans were already flooding social media in disbelief. The trending tag was simple but devastating: Shady resigns. But beneath the shock, a darker truth began to emerge. This wasn't about one bad meeting, one disagreement, or one bad week of practice. It was about something deeper, a toxic power struggle between ownership, management, and coaching staff that had been boiling for months. Sanders, a fifth-round pick who had beaten every odd to become the starter, had become the symbol of that dysfunction. His departure wasn't just a career move, it was a statement. If you're enjoying this video and loving the content, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. It really helps us know what you want to see more of. And why keep all the excitement to yourself? Share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who loves NFL drama. The NFL has seen players demand trades, hold out for contracts, even retire suddenly. But a quarterback in his prime, walking away from a starting job days before the season, that was unheard of. It forced the league, the fans, and the Browns organization to confront an uncomfortable question. What kind of environment drives a player to give up everything just to get out? And as the truth started to leak, one thing became clear. Shedeur Sanders didn't just quit the Browns, he exposed them. The day began like any other for most of Cleveland's staff, except for one thing. Shedeur Sanders was already inside the building before sunrise. That alone raised eyebrows. Players rarely arrive that early unless something's wrong. Security cameras reportedly caught him walking through the quiet corridors of the Browns facility, head down, earbuds in, carrying nothing but a leather portfolio. There were no signs of agitation, no frantic phone calls, no confrontation brewing. Just calm, almost unnervingly calm, the kind of quiet that precedes something massive. By 9:30 a.m., front office executives began receiving internal messages. Sanders is requesting an immediate meeting. That request alone was strange enough. Most conversations with players went through the coaching staff or player relations. But Sanders had skipped every layer of protocol, going straight to the top. And even more telling, he asked for the meeting to include owner Jimmy Haslam and general manager Andrew Barry, but not head coach Kevin Stefanski. Inside the Browns facility, that decision landed like a grenade. Stefanski had coached through controversy, from quarterback debates to locker room fractures, but to be deliberately excluded by his starting quarterback, that was new. Sources later described him as shocked but not surprised. The tension between the coaching staff and front office had been an open secret since the draft. Haslam and Barry had personally championed Sanders' selection, overriding the scouting department's preference for a different quarterback. From that moment, Stefanski reportedly felt his authority quietly slipping. So, when Sanders bypassed him on that Thursday morning, it wasn't just a meeting, it was a message. A message that whatever was broken inside that organization had finally snapped. Witnesses described the atmosphere as surreal. Staffers passing by the administrative wing noticed Sanders sitting in the hallway, legs crossed, staring blankly at the wall. Calm, collected, detached. He looked like someone who'd already moved on, one employee recalled. There were no heated exchanges, no packing, no frustration. When Haslam and Barry arrived, he stood, shook their hands, and followed them into the conference room without a word. What happened inside would soon dominate headlines, but even before anyone knew the details, those around the building could feel the shift. Something irreversible was unfolding. Team officials who tried to approach Stefanski afterward said he was visibly tense, packing his office, repeatedly checking his phone. Others recalled him muttering, "It's out of my hands now." Within an hour, whispers began circulating through the locker room. Equipment staff noticed an empty space where Sanders' cleats usually sat. Trainers mentioned seeing him walk out with his personal items. By noon, players were texting each other, asking the same question, "Is Shedeur gone?" And while the building buzzed with confusion, Sanders himself had already vanished, driving away from the facility without looking back. The calmness he carried that morning wasn't serenity. It was resolution. Because in his mind, the storm had already passed, and Cleveland just didn't know it yet. To understand why Shedeur Sanders' resignation stunned the football world, you have to go back a few weeks, to the slow, quiet breakdown happening inside the Browns' locker room. On the surface, everything looked fine. Sanders had just been named the starting quarterback after outplaying Dylan Gabriel through training camp. The local media praised his poise, the ownership publicly backed him, and fans finally believed the team had found its next great leader. But behind closed doors, things were unraveling fast. When Gabriel was suspended, following the now infamous training camp altercation, most assumed the controversy had ended there. But in truth, it only made things worse. The coaching staff had never wanted Sanders as their starter. His success didn't feel like a victory to them. It felt like a mandate from ownership. Sources later revealed that offensive meetings became tense and unproductive. Stefanski's play-calling group reportedly offered Sanders minimal input in offensive design. Some assistant coaches stopped providing detailed feedback altogether. What should have been the start of a promising partnership began to feel like a Cold War. Players in the locker room saw it happening in real time. Veterans whispered about the silent divide between the front office and the field. One offensive lineman reportedly told a friend, "You can feel the tension every day. It's like two different teams sharing the same building." Sanders, who had built his reputation on discipline and composure, tried to keep his focus. He arrived early, stayed late, and carried himself like a professional. But even he couldn't ignore what was happening. It wasn't just about football. It was about respect. The more he performed, the more resistance he seemed to face. Coaches stopped addressing him directly during film sessions, and some teammates noticed small but deliberate acts of exclusion, his feedback being brushed aside, his leadership moments downplayed. By late August, the atmosphere had become suffocating. Then came the final straw, a private quarterback meeting the day before his resignation. According to multiple sources, the session turned confrontational when a member of the coaching staff accused Sanders of overstepping boundaries. The exchange reportedly grew heated, with the coach raising his voice and warning him to know his place. Sanders, always measured, pushed back. "I've done everything asked of me," he said. "If respect isn't earned by performance, then what's it earned by?" That confrontation didn't end with shouting. It ended with clarity. For Sanders, it confirmed what he had suspected for weeks, that no matter how well he played, he was operating inside a broken system where success threatened authority. By the time he left that meeting, the decision was already made. The next morning, when he arrived at the facility before anyone else, it wasn't a sign of panic, it was a sign of peace. Sanders had reached his breaking point, and rather than fight a war he couldn't win, he chose to walk away from it entirely. By Thursday afternoon, just hours after Shedeur Sanders' sudden resignation, the situation in Cleveland took an even darker turn. What had already felt like an organizational disaster suddenly escalated into a full-blown scandal when a leaked audio recording began circulating across private NFL communication channels. The clip, allegedly taken during Wednesday's quarterback meeting, just one day before Sanders walked out, captured a heated exchange that pulled back the curtain on Cleveland's dysfunction for everyone to hear. The audio wasn't crystal clear. Voices overlapped, static cut in and out, and parts were inaudible. But what was clear shocked those who listened. A male voice, believed to be a member of the Browns' coaching staff, could be heard berating Sanders over what he described as attitude and entitlement. The coach's tone was sharp, almost venomous. "You need to understand something," the voice said. "Draft position doesn't give you authority here. Ownership preference doesn't earn you respect. You earn that through performance and preparation, not politics." Sanders' response, though calm, carried an unmistakable edge. "I've done exactly that," he replied. "I show up early, I stay late, I study, I lead. I've done everything this organization has asked, but I won't pretend everything's fine when it's clearly not." His tone was steady, measured, the voice of someone no longer asking for approval, but simply stating facts. That seemed to provoke the coach even more. His voice rose sharply. "You're not running this team. You're a player, act like one." Then silence. A few seconds of quiet static before Sanders' final words, delivered with striking composure. "Maybe not, but I'm not staying somewhere I'm not valued, no matter what PR says otherwise." And then the audio cut off. Within hours, the clip was everywhere, passed between reporters, executives, and players across the league. By evening, it had reached social media, where it spread like wildfire. The hashtag #BrownsLeak trended nationally, and fans were left dissecting every second of the muffled conversation. Cleveland's front office declined to comment, and Sanders' camp stayed silent, neither confirming nor denying the recording's authenticity. But insiders within the NFL claimed that several recognizable voices on the tape matched Browns staff members.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button.
The fallout was immediate. Analysts called it the most damning inside look at an NFL locker room in years. Former players weighed in, some defending Sanders, others blaming the organization for letting such dysfunction reach the surface. Behind the scenes, Cleveland officials scrambled to find the source of the leak. The team reportedly launched an internal investigation, though few believed it would lead anywhere. But what made the audio truly explosive wasn't just the content, it was the timing. Released within hours of Sanders' resignation, it painted a vivid picture of a player pushed to his breaking point and an organization too fractured to hold itself together. The public no longer saw Shedeur Sanders as a quitter. They saw him as the man who refused to stay silent inside a collapsing system and left just before it fell apart completely. By the time the sun set that Thursday, the Cleveland Browns were in freefall. What began as a quiet morning resignation had spiraled into one of the most chaotic days in recent franchise history. Inside the facility, staff members were reeling, trying to process what had just happened. Coaches who'd spent the offseason building an offense around Shedeur Sanders now sat in stunned silence, faces lit by the glow of their phones as the leaked recording spread across social media like wildfire. There was no official statement, no attempt to control the narrative, just confusion, denial, and the growing realization that the damage might already be permanent. Within hours, ESPN, Bleacher Report, and nearly every major sports outlet ran the same headline. Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders resigns amid internal turmoil. Analysts scrambled to understand how a rookie sensation, one who had just earned the starting job, could walk away so suddenly. The organization's silence only fueled speculation. Reporters outside the Browns' training facility described a scene that felt less like a football operation and more like a corporate crisis. Security escorted media members off the property. Players were told not to speak to anyone. Phones buzzed constantly as NFL insiders compared notes and leaked tidbits. Inside the locker room, disbelief gave way to quiet anger. Several veterans reportedly gathered in private, venting frustration not at Sanders, but at the organization itself. "He's not wrong," one defensive captain said. "Nobody can function in this kind of chaos." The team's leadership council requested an emergency meeting with General Manager Andrew Barry, demanding clarity. But according to sources, Barry didn't have answers. Even he seemed blindsided by how quickly the situation had escalated. Meanwhile, head coach Kevin Stefanski faced the press without addressing the elephant in the room. His brief remarks, "We're focused on moving forward," came across as hollow. Players noticed, fans noticed, and the national media tore it apart. Within minutes, commentators were calling it the most tone-deaf response of the season. By evening, Cleveland's fanbase was in open revolt online. The hashtag Browns Meltdown trended alongside Shedeur Resigns, with fans demanding accountability from ownership. Season ticket holders flooded the team's comment sections with frustration and disbelief. For a franchise already known for instability, this felt like a breaking point, the moment when even the most loyal supporters began to lose faith. Behind the scenes, panic took hold. Haslam reportedly held a closed-door meeting with senior staff that stretched late into the night. Sources described the mood as grim, with heated discussions about damage control, legal implications of the leaked recording, and how to salvage a locker room on the verge of mutiny. But there was no quick fix. The Browns' problem wasn't just a missing quarterback, it was a shattered reputation, a fractured trust between players and management, a coaching staff that had lost credibility. And by Friday morning, one harsh truth had settled in across the league. Shedeur Sanders hadn't abandoned Cleveland, he'd escaped it. By Friday morning, the Cleveland Browns were no longer a football team. They were a case study in organizational collapse. Every layer of leadership, from ownership down to the locker room, was consumed by distrust, finger-pointing, and quiet panic. The resignation of Shedeur Sanders wasn't an isolated event. It was the final domino in a structure that had been cracking for months. Once the face of the franchise walked away, every hidden fracture was suddenly visible for the world to see. Inside Berea headquarters, chaos replaced routine. The front office operated like a crisis newsroom, with frantic calls to PR firms, league officials, and player agents. Owner Jimmy Haslam's credibility had evaporated overnight. For years, he'd promised stability, preaching patience and unity. But now, league insiders openly mocked that narrative. The leaked audio had exposed what insiders already suspected: a team run by ego and interference rather than football logic. Haslam's decision to overrule his coaching staff and force the drafting of Sanders had destroyed internal balance, and now it was costing him everything. General Manager Andrew Barry wasn't spared either. Once seen as a calm, analytical presence, Barry now appeared powerless. His attempts to mediate between ownership and coaching had failed spectacularly. Reports surfaced that he'd pleaded with Sanders to reconsider, offering staff changes and even new offensive leadership. But those gestures only highlighted how fractured the power structure had become. When the GM is negotiating against his own head coach, the system is broken beyond repair. Kevin Stefanski, meanwhile, was left to navigate the fallout without authority or support. In the public eye, he still held the title of head coach, but within the building, his voice no longer carried weight. Players had begun to tune him out, sensing that his future was uncertain. One veteran reportedly told a teammate, "We don't know who's actually in charge anymore." That sentence summed up the Browns perfectly: a team without direction, unity, or accountability. The ripple effects extended far beyond the facility walls. Free agent conversations stalled. Agents warned their clients to stay away from Cleveland until things stabilize. Coaches around the league privately questioned whether anyone could repair the damage. Even rival executives, usually tight-lipped, admitted the Browns' dysfunction had reached historic levels. In just 48 hours, a promising season had turned into an existential crisis. The front office lost its franchise quarterback, the locker room lost faith in leadership, and ownership lost control of the narrative. Every promise of a new era sounded hollow now. And as the national spotlight intensified, the truth became unavoidable. This wasn't a rebuild gone wrong. It was a system collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. For Cleveland, there was no longer a path to simply move on. The organization would have to rebuild trust, hierarchy, and culture from the ground up. But first, it had to face the harsh reality. Shedeur Sanders didn't destroy the Browns, he revealed what was already broken. When word of Shedeur Sanders' resignation and the leaked audio hit league offices, the shockwaves spread far beyond Cleveland. Front offices across the NFL immediately took notice. This wasn't just a story about a struggling franchise. It was a wake-up call to every organization that thought dysfunction could stay hidden behind polished press conferences and PR statements. Sanders had done what few players ever dared. He exposed an entire system from the inside out without saying another word publicly. Within hours, reports surfaced that multiple general managers held internal meetings to discuss player relations and chain-of-command reviews. Translation: teams wanted to make sure nothing like this could happen to them. Several ownership groups quietly instructed their executives to reinforce communication lines between coaches and quarterbacks, ensuring that internal disagreements never reached a boiling point. The Browns' meltdown had become a cautionary tale, a real-time example of what happens when ego replaces structure. At the league level, the NFL's public relations department faced a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they couldn't appear to interfere in a team's internal affairs. On the other, the optics of a young, promising quarterback walking away from the game because of organizational toxicity were disastrous. Media outlets framed the story as the modern NFL's culture crisis. Pundits debated whether this was an isolated incident or a symptom of something deeper. An era where players, empowered by media platforms and personal brands, were no longer willing to tolerate mismanagement quietly. Former players joined the conversation. Some applauded Sanders' decision, calling it an act of self-respect in an industry that often demands blind loyalty. Others criticized it, arguing that walking away set a dangerous precedent for younger athletes. But regardless of opinion, one fact remained. Everyone was talking about it. The Sanders resignation had become more than a Cleveland story. It was a league-wide mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths. For teams like the 49ers, Ravens, and Cowboys, franchises known for strong organizational hierarchies, executives used the Browns' situation as a warning sign. This is what happens when ownership meddles in football operations, one anonymous GM told The Athletic. Once players sense chaos upstairs, it trickles down fast. The Browns' dysfunction was now being studied as a what not to do scenario in leadership workshops and sports management programs. Beyond management, though, the emotional toll remains with the fans, the true victims of this collapse. Their heartbreak has evolved into clarity. They see now that hero worship and blind loyalty can't fix systemic decay. That accountability must start at the top, not from the players who bear the consequences. The fanbase's outrage, once dismissed as overreaction, now feels like prophecy fulfilled. For Shedeur Sanders, this chapter closes not in disgrace, but in empowerment. He exposed what countless others endured silently. He refused to compromise integrity for image, and in doing so, forced the entire NFL to reckon with uncomfortable truths about leadership, respect, and culture. His next move, wherever it leads, will carry the weight of that transformation, a symbol of resistance against the machinery that consumes talent without nurturing it. Cleveland, meanwhile, stands at the crossroads of redemption or ruin. The organization can either confront its failures and rebuild from humility, or continue down the path of denial that's defined its modern era. Either way, the reckoning has arrived, and this time, there's no walking away from it.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.